Have you ever caught your best friend stealing from you and spent months planning the perfect revenge? I found the transaction on a Wednesday afternoon while reconciling my business accounts. A withdrawal for $8,500 dated 3 weeks earlier that I never authorized. My company, Meridian Tech Solutions, had been growing steadily for 2 years, and I trusted my business partner and best friend of 15 years, Kyle Brennan, to handle day-to-day financial operations while I focused on client acquisition. I stared at the screen trying to find a reasonable explanation. Maybe Kyle had paid a vendor I'd forgotten about. Maybe there was an equipment purchase I'd approved and didn't remember. I pulled up the transaction details. The payment went to an account I didn't recognize. No invoice attached, no approval email, no paper trail. My stomach tightened as I scrolled through the previous 3 months of transactions. There were 5 more just like it. Amounts ranging from $3,200 to $12,000. All going to the same mystery account. All initiated by Kyle using his access credentials. Over $47,000 in 3 months. I sat there in my home office at 2:30 in the afternoon, feeling my 15-year friendship disintegrate in real time. I didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, I called our accountant, Priya Mehta, and asked her to pull a complete transaction history for the past year without telling Kyle. She asked why, and I said I was doing routine audit prep. She promised to have everything by tomorrow morning. That night, Kyle texted asking if I wanted to grab dinner and watch the game at Murphy's like we did most Wednesdays. I said I had a client meeting that ran late. He sent back a thumbs-up emoji. I sat alone in my apartment eating leftover Chinese food and wondering how long this had been going on. Kyle and I started Meridian together after working at the same software consulting firm for 3 years. We'd been best friends since college, roommates for 4 years, stood up at each other's weddings. His daughter called me Uncle Julian. When my wife Andrea left me 18 months ago, Kyle was the one who showed up every night for 2 weeks to make sure I ate and didn't do anything stupid. The idea that he'd been stealing from our company felt impossible, but the numbers didn't lie. Priya called at 8:15 the next morning. "Julian, we need to meet in person. Not at the office." Her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. We met at a coffee shop 3 blocks from our building. She spread printouts across the table, her finger tracing lines of transactions highlighted in yellow. "It goes back 14 months. Small amounts at first. $500 here, $800 there. Then it escalates. In the last 6 months alone, he's moved $127,000 out of the business account." My coffee went cold as she walked me through the pattern. Kyle had created a fake vendor account under the name Clearview Consulting Services. He'd file false invoices for IT infrastructure maintenance, software licensing, security audits. All services we actually needed, making them easy to overlook during quick reviews. The money went to an account he controlled. Priya had traced the routing numbers. "I'm required to report this to the board and potentially law enforcement," she said, "but I wanted to talk to you first since you're 50% owner." I asked her to give me 48 hours before doing anything official. She looked uncomfortable but agreed. I spent that day and the next going through every detail of Kyle's theft. The false invoices were good, professional looking with detailed line items that matched our actual operational needs. If I hadn't been looking specifically for fraud, I would have approved them without a second thought. But now I saw the pattern. Kyle submitted these fake invoices on Fridays when I was usually out meeting clients or traveling. He'd approve them himself, using our dual signature system that we'd set up to streamline operations. We'd both agreed 2 years ago that either partner could approve invoices under $15,000 without requiring both signatures. It was supposed to make us more efficient. Instead, it made theft easier. I started documenting everything. Screenshots, bank records, the fake Clearview Consulting website Kyle had created to make the vendor look legitimate. He'd even set up a phone number that went to a Google Voice account he controlled. When I called it, I got a professional voicemail saying Clearview was experiencing high call volume. The detail in his deception was staggering. This wasn't impulsive. This was calculated fraud over more than a year. Thursday night, Kyle called asking if I wanted to come over for a barbecue on Saturday. His wife Melissa was making her famous ribs, and their daughter Emma wanted to show me her science fair project. I said I'd be there. My voice sounded normal even though my hands were shaking. After we hung up, I sat on my couch staring at the financial records spread across my coffee table. Kyle had a wife and kid, a mortgage, 2 car payments. I tried to understand what would drive him to steal from the business we'd built together. Then I remembered something. 6 months ago, Kyle mentioned that Melissa's mother had been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's, and they were looking at memory care facilities. Those places cost $8,000 to $12,000 per month. The timing matched when his theft had escalated from small amounts to larger ones. I felt a flash of sympathy before anger crushed it. If he needed money, he could have talked to me. We could have worked something out, taken out a loan, adjusted his salary. Instead, he'd chosen to steal and lie. Friday morning, I met with a lawyer named Thomas Grayson who specialized in business fraud and partnership disputes. I brought all the documentation Priya had compiled. Thomas reviewed everything over 90 minutes, occasionally making notes on his legal pad. When he finished, he looked at me over his glasses. "You have an airtight case for criminal prosecution and civil recovery. The amount stolen exceeds $100,000, which makes this a felony. He's looking at 3 to 7 years in prison if convicted." The words hung in the air. Prison? Kyle in prison. Emma visiting her father behind glass. Melissa trying to explain to their daughter why Daddy wasn't coming home. Thomas continued. You also have grounds to dissolve the partnership and claim damages. With this evidence, you'd likely get a judgment for the full amount stolen, plus penalties and legal fees. But here's what you need to know. Prosecuting him criminally will destroy him completely. His professional reputation, his ability to work in this industry again, his family's financial stability. Are you prepared for that? I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to watch Kyle's world burn the way mine had burned when I discovered his betrayal. But another part remembered 15 years of friendship, the time he drove 8 hours to help me move into my first apartment, when he stayed up all night helping me prepare for the presentation that landed us our biggest client, how he'd held me when I cried about Andrea leaving. Thomas said I didn't have to decide immediately, but I shouldn't wait too long. Every day Kyle had access to company accounts was another day he could steal more or destroy evidence. I told Thomas I needed the weekend to think. He said he'd draft a partnership dissolution agreement and an asset freeze order I could file Monday morning if I decided to move forward. I went to Kyle's barbecue on Saturday and smiled while Emma showed me her project about renewable energy. I ate Melissa's ribs and laughed at Kyle's jokes about our competitor's terrible new website. The whole time, I was watching him, looking for signs of guilt or stress. But he seemed completely normal, relaxed and happy. Either he was an incredible actor, or he genuinely didn't think he'd get caught. Sunday evening, my phone rang. It was Kyle. Hey, can you meet me at the office tomorrow morning, like 7 before everyone else gets in? There's something I need to talk to you about. My pulse jumped. Did he know I'd found the transactions? Had Priya accidentally tipped him off? I kept my voice casual. Sure. What's it about? I'll explain tomorrow. It's important, though. And Julian, I'm really sorry. He hung up before I could ask what he was apologizing for. I barely slept that night. By 6:30 Monday morning, I was in my car driving to our office building with the folder of evidence on my passenger seat. I got there at 6:45 and waited in the parking lot, watching the entrance. Kyle's car pulled in at 6:52. He looked tired, older somehow than he had at the barbecue. We walked into the building together, making small talk about the weekend. Inside our office, Kyle made coffee while I sat at the conference table. He brought me a mug and sat down across from me. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you this for weeks. Julian, I've been having some financial problems. Melissa's mom needs full-time care, and it's costing us about $10,000 a month. I made some bad decisions. I waited. Kyle stared at his coffee mug. I took out a second mortgage on our house, but it wasn't enough. Then I started using our business credit card for personal expenses. I know it was wrong. I was going to tell you and pay it all back, but it spiraled. He looked up at me with what appeared to be genuine remorse. I've charged about $23,000 to the company card over the last 6 months. I have a repayment plan worked out. I can have it all paid back in 18 months if you'll let me. I let the silence stretch. Kyle shifted in his seat. I know this is a huge violation of trust. If you want to end the partnership, I understand, but I'm hoping we can work something out. I'll sign whatever you want, take a reduced salary, whatever it takes. I took a long drink of coffee, then set down my mug carefully. Kyle, is there anything else you need to tell me? Anything else I should know about? He shook his head. No, that's everything, I swear. Just the credit card charges. I pulled the folder from my bag and slid it across the table. Then explained Clearview Consulting Services. His face went white. The color drained so fast I thought he might pass out. He opened the folder and stared at the bank statements, the fake invoices, the transaction history showing every payment he'd stolen over 14 months. His hands started shaking. Julian, I can explain. You just did explain. You told me about $23,000 in credit card charges. You didn't mention the $127,000 you've stolen using fraudulent invoices and a fake vendor account. I was going to tell you about that too. You just wanted to see if confessing to the smaller amount would satisfy me. Test whether I knew about the real theft. That's called manipulation, Kyle. On top of fraud and embezzlement. He put his head in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red. My mother-in-law is dying. Melissa is falling apart. The care facility costs $12,000 a month and insurance only covers half. I didn't know what else to do. I was desperate. You could have talked to me. We could have figured something out together. Instead, you chose to steal from the company we built. From me. Kyle stood up and started pacing. You're right. I know you're right. It was wrong and stupid, and I'll do anything to make it right. Let me pay it back. I'll sell my house if I have to. Just please don't report this to the police. I watched him fall apart. This was my best friend begging me not to destroy his life. Part of me wanted to cave, to find a way to forgive him and move forward. But a larger part was calculating something else. If Kyle was this desperate, this willing to steal and lie to protect his family, maybe he'd be willing to do other things too. Maybe I could use this situation to my advantage. I'm not calling the police today, I said. Kyle's relief was immediate and visible. But we need to restructure our partnership agreement. You're going to sign over an additional 30% of your ownership stake to me as repayment for what you stole. That makes the split 70-30 in my favor. You'll also take a 50% salary cut for the next 2 years. Kyle opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. He was doing the math. Even with the reduced salary and ownership stake, he'd avoid prison and keep his license to practice. Okay, I agree. When do you want to do the paperwork? My lawyer has it ready. We'll sign it this afternoon. Kyle nodded slowly. Thank you, Julian. I know I don't deserve this. I'll never be able to repay you for giving me this chance. I stood up and walked to the door. Actually, Kyle, there is something you can help me with. I have a client project that needs some special attention. Very sensitive work. If you handle it successfully, we'll call your debt settled and keep the new ownership split, but restore your full salary. His face lit up with hope. Anything. Whatever you need. That was exactly what I wanted to hear. Over the next 3 days, I had our lawyer draft the new partnership agreement that gave me majority control of Meridian Tech Solutions. Kyle signed without reading it carefully, so desperate to avoid criminal prosecution that he'd have signed almost anything. The agreement included a clause that all disputes would be handled through binding arbitration using an arbitrator of my choice. Another clause stated that if Kyle violated any company policy or engaged in any unethical conduct, I could buy out his remaining stake for $1. Essentially, I'd structured the deal so that Kyle was now working for me rather than with me, and I held all the power to remove him completely whenever I chose. On Thursday, I presented Kyle with his special project. We have a new client, Donovan Financial Group. They're a mid-size investment firm looking to upgrade their network security and data management systems. It's a $340,000 contract. Kyle's eyes widened. That was one of our largest deals ever. I want you to lead the implementation. But here's the sensitive part. The timeline is extremely aggressive. They want everything done in 6 weeks, which is half our normal implementation time. That's barely possible, Kyle said. We'd need to work around the clock and cut some corners on testing. The client is willing to pay premium rates for the rush job. They're under regulatory pressure to upgrade their systems by a specific deadline. They need this done fast, and they're willing to accept some risk. I slid the contract across my desk. If you deliver this on time, I'll consider your debt fully repaid and will restore your salary to full amount starting next month. Kyle picked up the contract and started reading. I'd spent 3 days creating Donovan Financial Group out of thin air. Fake website, fake corporate, documents, fake contact information. All of it leading back to accounts and phone numbers I controlled. The contract looked legitimate with detailed specifications for network hardware, software licensing, and implementation services. This looks straightforward, Kyle said. Aggressive timeline, but doable. Who's my contact at Donovan? David Ashford, their IT director. I've already had preliminary meetings with him. He knows you'll be handling implementation. David Ashford was also me, using a burner phone and a voice-over IP service that made it look like I was calling from Donovan's main number. I'll need to pull in some of our contractors to meet this timeline, Kyle said. Whatever you need. I'm authorizing unlimited overtime and contractor expenses for this project. Spare no expense to make the deadline. Kyle left my office energized for the first time since I'd confronted him about the theft. He thought he'd found his path to redemption. In reality, I was setting him up to commit fraud on a massive scale. Over the next week, Kyle assembled a team of 3 contractors and started purchasing equipment for the Donovan implementation. Network servers, switches, software licenses, security appliances, all high-end enterprise gear totaling about $180,000. He used company credit to purchase everything, just as I'd authorized. I monitored every transaction. I also started seeding problems. As David Ashford, I sent Kyle increasingly demanding emails, changing specifications, adding requirements, moving deadlines forward. Kyle pushed back occasionally, but mostly complied because he was desperate to complete this project and clear his debt. I scheduled weekend meetings that I'd cancel at the last minute. I requested detailed progress reports every other day. I made Kyle's life hell while appearing to be a difficult but legitimate client. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything. Every email, every purchase order, every decision Kyle made trying to meet the impossible demands of a fake client. 2 weeks into the project, I called a meeting with our real clients to discuss Meridian's financial status. I'd invited our 3 largest clients representing 70% of our annual revenue. In the conference room, I presented them with a choice. I've discovered that my business partner has been engaging in fraudulent activities that put the company and all of our client relationships at risk. I want to be transparent with you about the situation and my plan to address it. I walked them through Kyle's theft of $127,000 using the fake vendor account. I showed them the evidence Priya had compiled. Then I shared my concerns about Kyle's judgment and trustworthiness going forward. Our biggest client, Christine Valdez from North Point Manufacturing, asked the obvious question. If you knew he was stealing, why didn't you report it to the police? Because I'm trying to give him a chance to make it right without destroying his family. His mother-in-law has Alzheimer's and needs expensive care. I understand the desperation, even though I don't excuse the theft. Christine nodded. That's generous. But how does this affect our projects? I'm taking over as the sole decision-maker for all client projects. Kyle will remain involved in technical implementation, but I'll be personally overseeing quality control and communication. I wanted you to hear this from me directly, rather than through rumors or public filings. The clients appreciated the transparency. We spent another hour discussing their concerns and my plans to strengthen internal controls. By the end of the meeting, all 3 clients had committed to continuing their contracts with explicit understanding that I was now the responsible party. That evening, Kyle called me panicking. "Julian, the Donovan project is falling apart. David Ashford keeps changing requirements, and I can't get straight answers about what they actually need. I'm worried we're going to miss the deadline." "How much have we spent so far?" "About $180,000 on equipment and another $40,000 in contractor costs. We're committed for the full $340,000 contract amount." "Can you deliver something functional by the deadline?" "Maybe, but it won't meet all of Ashford's specifications. Some of what he's asking for is technically impossible in this time frame." "Do your best. I'll handle Ashford if he complains." Kyle sounded desperate. "What if he refuses to pay? We'll be out $220,000 with nothing to show for it." "That's why I need you to document everything. Every email from Ashford, every change request, every impossible demand. If he doesn't pay, we'll have grounds to sue for breach of contract." This was the trap closing. Kyle had now spent over $220,000 of company money on a fake project. If anyone looked closely, they'd see he was purchasing equipment with no legitimate purpose, paying contractors to work on non-existent deliverables, and documenting conversations with a client who didn't exist. All while, I had proof that he'd been authorized to do it and was following my directions. 3 weeks later, as the Donovan deadline approached, I made my move. I called an emergency board meeting with Priya and our outside legal counsel, Barbara Keene. Kyle wasn't invited. In the conference room, I presented them with a new set of concerns. "I've been reviewing the Donovan Financial Group project and I've discovered serious problems. The client doesn't exist. Donovan Financial Group is a fabrication. Kyle has been purchasing equipment and paying contractors for a fake project. He's defrauded the company of over $220,000 in the last month alone." Barbara's face went hard. "Do you have evidence?" I showed them everything. The fake Donovan website that I'd created and then taken offline 2 days ago. The phone number that now went to a disconnected message. The business registration records showing Donovan Financial Group was dissolved 3 years ago. Then I showed them Kyle's purchase orders, contractor payments, and project documentation. Everything appeared to show Kyle working on a project for a company that didn't exist. Priya looked sick. "This is on top of the $127,000 he already stole using fake invoices." "Exactly. Kyle has stolen nearly $350,000 from Meridian over the past 14 months using increasingly sophisticated fraud schemes." Barbara asked the crucial question. "How did he get authorization to spend $220,000 on a fake project?" "I approved the project based on information Kyle provided. He told me he'd been in contact with Donovan Financial Group through a referral from one of our other clients. He showed me a preliminary contract that I now know he fabricated. I trusted him to do proper due diligence on new clients, which is standard operating procedure for our partnership." I pulled out another folder. "Here are the emails Kyle sent me about Donovan. You can see he was pushing hard for us to take this project despite the aggressive timeline. In hindsight, I think he was hoping to move equipment and bill contractors in a way that would let him funnel more money out of the company." I'd written those emails myself, from Kyle's company account that I'd gained access to using an admin password reset. The emails made it look like Kyle had brought the Donovan project to me and advocated strongly for taking it despite red flags. Barbara reviewed the emails carefully. "This is devastating evidence. Combined with the prior theft, Kyle is looking at serious federal fraud charges. Wire fraud, money laundering, possibly RICO if we can show a pattern of criminal enterprise." "I need to make a decision," I said. "Do I report this to the FBI and pursue criminal prosecution, or do I try to resolve this internally one more time?" Priya shook her head. "Julian, you gave him a chance after the first theft. He responded by stealing even more. There's no coming back from this." "I agree," Barbara said. "You have a fiduciary duty to protect the company. Letting Kyle continue would be negligent. You need to remove him from the partnership immediately and report this to law enforcement." I pretended to struggle with the decision for dramatic effect. "Can we at least give him a chance to explain before we call the FBI?" Barbara sighed. "It's your company, but I strongly advise against it. Every conversation with Kyle from this point forward should be recorded and conducted with legal counsel present." We scheduled a meeting for the following morning. I called Kyle and told him we needed to discuss the Donovan project. He agreed to come in at 8. That night, I prepared the final pieces of my revenge. I contacted the FBI's white-collar crime division and provided them with a detailed summary of Kyle's fraudulent activities. I sent them copies of all documentation showing the $127,000 he'd stolen using fake invoices. I explained that I'd be confronting Kyle tomorrow morning and wanted law enforcement standing by. The FBI agent I spoke with, Special Agent Nicole Chen, asked pointed questions about my own involvement. "You authorized over $200,000 in spending on this Donovan project. How do we know you weren't complicit in the fraud?" "I have emails from Kyle pushing for the project and misrepresenting the client's legitimacy. I also have documentation showing I tried to verify Donovan's credentials, but Kyle provided false information. I'm the victim here, not a co-conspirator." Agent Chen said they'd review everything and get back to me. I hung up knowing I'd just made Kyle's situation exponentially worse. By involving federal law enforcement, I'd escalated this from a civil partnership dispute to a criminal investigation. Kyle arrived at the office at 7:55, wearing a suit, probably thinking this was a regular client meeting. Barbara, Priya, and I were waiting in the conference room. Kyle's face fell when he saw the setup. "What's going on?" "Sit down, Kyle. We need to discuss Donovan Financial Group." He sat slowly. Barbara started. "Mr. Brennan, as legal counsel for Meridian Tech Solutions, I need to inform you that we've discovered serious irregularities with the Donovan project. Our investigation shows that Donovan Financial Group doesn't exist and never has. You've spent over $220,000 of company money on a fabricated project." Kyle's face went from confused to panicked. "What?" "No. David Ashford is a real person. I've been talking to him for weeks. Julian, you authorized this project." "I authorized it based on false information you provided. The contract you showed me was fake. The client doesn't exist. You've committed fraud." "That's insane. You were the one who brought me the Donovan project. You told me it was a rush job for a new client. I have your emails." "I don't know what you're talking about. Priya, show Kyle the email trail." Priya pulled up her laptop and turned it toward Kyle. On screen were the fabricated emails I'd sent from Kyle's account, showing him pitching the Donovan project to me. Kyle stared at the screen in disbelief. "I never wrote those emails. Julian, you know I never wrote those. Someone hacked my account." "Your account hasn't been hacked. Its security shows no unauthorized access." Barbara leaned forward. "Mr. Brennan, given the severity of these allegations and your prior admission to stealing $127,000 using fake invoices, we're recommending criminal prosecution. The FBI has been notified and will be contacting you shortly." Kyle looked at me, betrayal and confusion mixing with rising panic. "Julian, why are you doing this? We had an agreement. I was making it right." "You stole from me, Kyle. You betrayed 15 years of friendship. Did you really think I'd just let that go? But the Donovan project, I was following your directions. You set this up. Prove it. You have emails from your own account showing you initiated the project. You have purchase orders you signed. You have contractor payments you authorized. Where's your evidence that I was involved?" Kyle's hands were shaking. "The phone calls. David Ashford's calls came from the Donovan number. The emails came from Ashford's address. You were impersonating the client. Do you have recordings of those calls? Proof that I was the person on the other end? Because our phone system logs show the calls came from an outside line registered to Donovan Financial Group. I'd used a sophisticated spoofing service that made it virtually impossible to trace the calls back to me. You can't do this. I'll tell them the truth. I'll show them... Show them what? That you stole $127,000 using fake invoices? That you then spent another $220,000 on a fabricated project? The evidence is overwhelming. You're going to prison, Kyle, and you did it to yourself." The realization hit him like a physical blow. He'd walked right into a trap. Every email he'd sent, every purchase he'd made, every decision he'd documented had created an airtight case against him, and I'd made sure there was no trail leading back to me. Kyle stood up so fast, his chair fell backward. "You set me up. You created the Donovan project to frame me. This whole thing was revenge for the money I took." Barbara put up a hand. "Mr. Brennan, I'm advising you to stop talking. Anything you say right now can be used against you in criminal proceedings." But Kyle wasn't listening. He was staring at me with a mix of horror and grudging respect. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the day I found the first fraudulent transaction. I spent 3 months documenting your theft and creating a perfect trap. You walked into it beautifully. Why? Why not just report me to the police in the first place? Why go through all this?" I stood up and walked around the table until I was standing directly in front of him. "Because I wanted you to understand what betrayal feels like. I wanted you to experience the same desperation and panic that I felt when I discovered my best friend was stealing from me. I wanted you to beg for mercy and then watch it get ripped away." Kyle's eyes filled with tears. "My family, Melissa and Emma. What happens to them? That's not my problem anymore. You should have thought about them before you stole from me." Barbara escorted Kyle out of the building. He walked out in a daze, his entire world collapsing around him. I sat in the conference room alone, feeling a mix of satisfaction and emptiness. I destroyed my best friend, methodically, completely, without mercy. Agent Chen from the FBI called 2 hours later. "Mr. Morrison, we've reviewed your documentation. This appears to be a clear case of business fraud and embezzlement. We'll be opening a formal investigation." I corrected her. "It's Mr. Reeves, Julian Reeves." "My apologies. Mr. Reeves, we'll need you to come in for a full interview. There are some questions about the Donovan project that need clarification." My stomach tightened. "What kind of questions?" "Just routine follow-up. Can you come in tomorrow morning at 9? I agreed and hung up. The FBI was looking closer at the Donovan project than I'd anticipated. If they dug deep enough, they might find the trail I'd tried to cover, the fake website I'd created, the voice-over IP service I'd used to impersonate David Ashford, the emails I'd sent from Kyle's account. I'd been careful, but not careful enough to stand up to a federal investigation. That evening, I met with Barbara at her office. The FBI wants to interview me about the Donovan project. They're asking questions. Barbara looked concerned. What kind of questions? They didn't specify, but I'm worried they're going to find evidence that I fabricated the project to frame Kyle. Did you? I didn't answer directly. Kyle stole $127,000 from our company using sophisticated fraud. He deserved to be punished. That's not what I asked. Did you create the Donovan Financial Group project to frame Kyle for additional theft? I looked her straight in the eye. Yes, I spent 3 months planning it. I created the fake client, impersonated their IT director, authorized Kyle to spend money on the project, then pulled the plug and reported him to the FBI. Every step was calculated. Barbara closed her eyes and leaned back in her chair. Julian, what you've described is conspiracy to commit fraud. Wire fraud. Possibly obstruction of justice depending on what you told the FBI in your initial report. You could be facing federal prison time yourself. But Kyle actually stole money. That part is real. It doesn't matter. You can't commit crimes to punish someone else's crimes. The justice system doesn't work that way. So, what do? You tell the FBI the truth, all of it. You explain that Kyle stole $127,000 and you were angry and created an elaborate scheme to get revenge. You express remorse, you cooperate fully, maybe they'll show leniency given the circumstances. And if they don't, then you're probably going to prison too. I left Barbara's office feeling my perfect revenge crumbling around me. I'd been so focused on destroying Kyle that I hadn't fully thought through the consequences of my own actions. I'd committed multiple federal crimes in my quest for payback. The FBI interview the next morning was brutal. Agent Chen brought a partner, Agent Kevin Duarte, and they spent 4 hours taking apart my story piece by piece. Where did I first hear about Donovan Financial Group? When did I realize they were fake? What due diligence did I do before authorizing the project? The lies I'd carefully constructed fell apart under professional interrogation. Agent Duarte pulled up phone records. These calls, allegedly from David Ashford at Donovan Financial, came from a voice-over IP service registered to a prepaid account. The account was activated 3 weeks before the first call to Kyle Brennan. Who opened that account? I could have kept lying, but Barbara was right. The evidence would bury me eventually. I did. I created the Donovan project to frame Kyle for additional theft after I discovered he'd stolen $127,000 from our company. Agent Chen's expression didn't change. Walk me through exactly what you did. I spent the next 2 hours confessing everything, creating the fake website, setting up the voice-over IP service, sending emails from Kyle's account, authorizing the equipment purchases, documenting everything to make it look like Kyle was acting independently, reporting him to the FBI while pretending to be a victim. When I finished, Agent Duarte looked at Agent Chen. We're talking conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, falsifying business records. This is substantial. Agent Chen nodded. Mr. Reeves, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and related charges. You have the right to remain silent. They read me my Miranda rights in that sterile FBI conference room. I was handcuffed and processed and put in a holding cell. Barbara arranged bail that afternoon, and I was released pending trial. But the damage was done. My plan for perfect revenge had backfired spectacularly. The news broke 2 days later. Local tech entrepreneur arrested in elaborate fraud scheme. The story detailed how I'd discovered Kyle's theft, and then spent months creating a fake company and fake project to frame him for even more fraud. Media coverage was relentless. Some articles portrayed me sympathetically as a victim who'd taken revenge too far. Others painted me as a vindictive criminal who'd abused my position to destroy my partner. Kyle's lawyer held a press conference claiming Kyle had been manipulated and framed by a controlling business partner who'd set him up to fail. They were using my confession to the FBI to argue that Kyle's involvement in the Donovan project was the result of my coercion, not his independent fraud. The legal strategy was obvious. Kyle's team wanted to paint him as a victim of my manipulation, someone who'd made a mistake with the original $127,000 theft, but had been trying to make amends when I trapped him in an elaborate scheme. My lawyer filed motions arguing that Kyle's original fraud was separate from my revenge plot, but the distinction got muddy fast. Both of us had committed crimes. The question was, who was more culpable? The case dragged through pre-trial motions for 6 months. Our business, Meridian Tech Solutions, collapsed within weeks of the arrests. Our clients terminated their contracts. Our contractors filed liens for unpaid work. Priya resigned and took a position with another firm. The company I'd spent 4 years building was destroyed. My wife Andrea, who'd left me 18 months earlier, called one evening. I saw the news about your arrest. Julian, what were you thinking? I was thinking my best friend betrayed me and deserved to be punished. So you committed federal crimes to get revenge? That's insane. He stole from me, Andrea, from the company we built. What was I supposed to do? Report it to the police like a normal person, not spend 3 months orchestrating an elaborate fraud to frame him. She was right, but I couldn't admit it. Why are you calling? We've been divorced for almost a year. Because I'm worried about you. You're so focused on revenge and punishment that you can't see how self-destructive you've become. This started with Kyle, But it goes back further. To us. To how you handled our divorce. I handled it fine. You're the one who left. I left because you couldn't forgive. I made one mistake, one affair that lasted 3 months, and you acted like I'd committed murder. You refused counseling, refused to even consider working through it. You just wanted to hurt me the way I'd hurt you. I'd caught Andrea cheating with a colleague from her law firm 2 years ago. We were separated within weeks, divorced within 6 months. I'd refused to speak to her beyond what was necessary for the legal proceedings. You cheated on me. What was there to forgive? I made a terrible mistake. I admitted it. I was willing to do anything to save our marriage. But you wanted punishment more than reconciliation, just like you wanted to punish Kyle instead of working through the theft. Those situations are completely different. Are they? Both times someone you loved betrayed you. Both times you chose revenge over resolution. Both times you destroyed the relationship completely. I hung up on her, but her words haunted me for days. Was she right? Had my need for revenge destroyed everything good in my life? Kyle's trial started in March, 8 months after his arrest. The prosecution presented the original $127,000 theft using fake invoices. That evidence was solid and undeniable. Kyle pleaded guilty to those charges as part of a deal. The Donovan Project charges were dropped after my confession made it clear Kyle had been manipulated into the fraud. The judge sentenced Kyle to 18 months in federal prison for the original theft, followed by 3 years probation. He'd serve his time at a minimum security facility and likely be released after 12 months for good behavior. Melissa divorced him while he was awaiting sentencing. Emma, their 9-year-old daughter, stopped speaking to her father after learning he'd stolen money and lied about it. Kyle's professional reputation was destroyed. He'd never work in tech again. My trial happened 2 months later. The evidence against me was overwhelming. I'd confessed to everything. My lawyer's only defense was arguing for leniency based on the emotional trauma of discovering Kyle's betrayal. The prosecutor wasn't sympathetic. She argued I'd abused my position as a business owner to commit sophisticated fraud, that I'd shown no remorse beyond getting caught, and that I'd tried to use law enforcement as a weapon against someone I claimed to care about. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before convicting me on conspiracy to commit wire fraud and identity theft charges. The sentencing hearing was devastating. The judge called my actions a calculated abuse of trust and position. She noted that while Kyle's original theft was wrong, my response was disproportionate and criminal. She sentenced me to 3 years in federal prison followed by 2 years supervised release. I'd serve at a medium security facility, likely spending 24 months inside before parole. My lawyer filed appeals, but they were denied. 8 months after Kyle's sentencing, I surrendered to the Bureau of Prisons to begin my sentence. Prison was everything I'd feared. Loss of freedom, loss of dignity, loss of purpose. I spent my days in a cell with another inmate, working in the prison laundry facility, counting down the months until release. Kyle was in a different facility, but I heard updates through mutual connections. He was taking college courses, working in the prison library, apparently doing well. After 6 months inside, I got a letter. Kyle's handwriting. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won. The letter was short. Julian, I've spent the last year thinking about what happened between us. I was wrong to steal from you. It was a betrayal of everything we built together. I was desperate and scared, and I made terrible choices. But what you did afterward was worse. You could have reported me to the police and let justice take its course. Instead, you turned our friendship into a weapon and used it to destroy me completely. We both ended up in prison because neither of us could forgive. I hope someday you understand that revenge doesn't heal anything. It just spreads the damage. I forgive you for what you did. I hope eventually you can forgive me too. Kyle. I read the letter 3 times. Then I wrote back. My letter was longer, angrier, full of justifications for my actions. But halfway through writing it, I stopped. Kyle was right. I'd had a choice when I discovered his theft. I could have prosecuted him through legal channels. Instead, I'd spent 3 months planning an elaborate scheme to hurt him worse than he'd hurt me. And in the process, I'd destroyed myself. I threw away my angry letter and wrote a different one. Kyle, you're right. I had choices, and I made the wrong ones. I was so focused on punishing you that I couldn't see I was becoming worse than what you'd done. I'm sorry. For everything. Julian. I served 22 months before being released on parole. Kyle had been out for 6 months by then, working at a community college teaching basic computer skills to returning students. We didn't contact each other after my release. Some wounds are too deep to heal. I found work as a consultant for small businesses, helping them with basic tech infrastructure. Nothing glamorous, but honest work that paid the bills. I lived in a small apartment downtown and tried to rebuild something resembling a normal life. Andrea reached out a year after my release. We met for coffee. She was remarried, pregnant with her first child, seemed genuinely happy. "How are you doing?" she asked. "Better. Learning to accept what I can't change." "I'm glad. I was worried about you." "I was worried about me too. You were right about everything. I chose revenge over resolution, and it destroyed me." Andrea reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We all make mistakes. The question is whether we learn from them." 3 years after the entire disaster began, I was invited to speak at a business ethics conference about my experience. I almost declined, but my parole officer thought it would be good for my rehabilitation. I stood in front of 200 business students and entrepreneurs and told them everything. Kyle's theft, my discovery, the revenge plot, the arrests, the trials, the prison time, the destruction of everything I'd built. I thought I was the hero of my story, I concluded, the wronged partner seeking justice, but I was actually the villain. I let my need for revenge consume me until I became worse than the person who'd wronged me. I hurt people who cared about me. I destroyed a business that could have survived. I threw away years of my life in prison, all because I couldn't forgive. After the talk, a young woman approached me. "Mr. Reeves, what would you do differently if you could go back?" I thought about it. I'd report Kyle's theft to the police immediately. Let the legal system handle it. I'd grieve the loss of the friendship, but I wouldn't try to burn down the world just to hurt one person. Revenge isn't worth what it costs. She thanked me and walked away. I stood there in the empty conference room thinking about Kyle, about 15 years of friendship destroyed by betrayal and revenge, about Melissa and Emma dealing with the fallout, about all the lives damaged by our inability to handle conflict like adults. I pulled out my phone and found Kyle's number. I'd saved it years ago but never called. My thumb hovered over the call button. Then I typed a text instead. "I spoke at a business ethics conference today. Told our story. Hope you're doing well." 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. Kyle's response was brief. "Glad you're using the experience to help others. I'm doing okay. Teaching helps. Take care of yourself." That was it. No deep reconciliation. No dramatic reunion. Just two people who'd destroyed each other acknowledging that they'd both survived. Sometimes that's the best revenge, refusing to let the damage define you, choosing to build something new instead of staying trapped in anger. I learned that lesson 3 years too late, but at least I learned it. That night, I deleted all the files I'd kept from the Meridian Tech days. The business documents, the evidence of Kyle's theft, the records of my revenge scheme. All of it went into digital trash and then permanent deletion. Some chapters need to close completely before new ones can begin. 5 years after everything fell apart, I ran into Kyle at a coffee shop downtown. We saw each other from across the room. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Kyle walked over. "Julian, Kyle." We stood there awkwardly. Then he pulled out a chair. "Do you have a minute?" I sat down. Kyle ordered coffee, and we made small talk about weather and traffic until our drinks arrived. Then he said, "I owe you an apology, a real one. What I did was unforgivable. I stole from you, lied to you, betrayed everything we built together. I've spent 5 years trying to understand why, and the truth is, there's no good reason. I was desperate and weak, and I made choices that destroyed both our lives." I took a breath. "I owe you an apology too. You were wrong to steal, but I was worse. I turned revenge into an obsession. I spent months plotting to hurt you instead of just letting the legal system handle it. I destroyed my own life chasing payback." Kyle nodded. "We both made terrible choices. Question is whether we can move past them. I don't know if we can be friends again. Too much damage. I'm not asking for friendship, just peace. I don't want to spend the rest of my life avoiding you or feeling guilty every time I hear your name." We talked for another hour, about prison, about rebuilding our lives, about the people we'd hurt. When we finally stood up to leave, Kyle extended his hand. I shook it. "Take care, Kyle." "You too, Julian." We walked out of that coffee shop in opposite directions. No dramatic reconciliation, no restoration of what we'd lost. Just two people who'd learned expensive lessons about betrayal and revenge, trying to build something better from the wreckage. Sometimes the perfect revenge is realizing you never needed it in the first place, that forgiveness and moving forward hurt less than hatred and destruction. I learned that lesson the hardest way possible, but I learned it. And maybe that's enough. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.